The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Rahul Naidoo. Rahul is the co-founder and CEO at Superscript. Rahul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, JP. Pleasure to be here.
Delighted to have you. Feel like this has been long in the making, given how long we've known each other. So we've a lot to cover. But let's start with yourself, please, as we do all of our guests. Can you give us a little bit of a summary of your background in technology and what your journey has been from where you started early on, some of the roles you held along the way, but most importantly, what led you to where you are today as the co-founder and CEO at Superscript?
I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa. I lived there till age 19. I came to the States initially in 2015 to study. It's in the Boston area. And well, today I've now been in the States for basically a decade because I came, I saw, I liked it, I stayed. And I think that, well, America, and particularly where we are right now, New York, is the best place on earth to build something. And probably the best place on earth to leverage technology to build a better future. And so here we are. I started my career in health tech. I worked for 2.5 years at a health tech startup called Locovant that was deep in the clinical trials data space, where I will say I cut my teeth on a bunch of healthcare data. At the same time, I learned that healthcare data is a mess, such a mess that it kind of made my head spin. And then for one reason or another, went into co-founding a health tech business that lives in messy healthcare data. But yeah, we are where we are because there was a problem that needed to be solved.
Indeed, there was. So let's jump into that. That is a great segue into the idea behind Superscript, which I'm very excited to share with our audience because we've known you for so many years. And I remember our early conversations when you and the founding team were in stealth mode and we were talking about what you were trying to accomplish. So let's set the stage for people listening. Who are Superscript? Who you are, what you do, mission of the business, what problem you're trying to solve?
Sweet. Glad you asked that question because, the thing about Superscript that I think differentiates us, not from all companies, but I'd say most, is we didn't start with a product or an app. In fact, as a company, we kind of reject the shower thought theory of startupping, the idea that you're taking a shower one day and you go, oh, I've got this product, let's go build it. Like that's not really how it works. Superscript started with a philosophy, and our philosophical position was born of our love for consumer technology and our belief that consumer technology empowers people. And when you empower people, we don't just see them make better decisions for themselves. We see them make better decisions in aggregate. Literal markets function more smoothly and deliver better outcomes. We've seen this in so many categories, from information technology, plane tickets, airline industry, e-commerce, consumer goods. Pricing is so efficient, goods are so available, costs have come down. And then we looked to healthcare and we saw an industry that has kind of skirted the technological trend to some extent. I mean, technology has had its place in medical devices, but healthcare technology has yet to really automate away the inefficiencies and create the efficiencies that it has in other consumer-facing categories. And so we looked at healthcare and we said, look, healthcare is a consumer-facing category. A lot of people don't think about it that way because they look to where the money is flowing. And they see giant insurance companies and giant healthcare organizations. And they say, oh, it's all the supply side. They control the market. Yeah. But the truth is, healthcare is a market comprised of normal people, who wake up in the morning and say, something is wrong with me, or I feel something in my body. I need to go do something about that. I'm going to make decisions in the market. I'm going to go out and buy. And that's actually the exact same buying motion that people exhibit when they buy a new pair of shoes or a t-shirt or a plane ticket. The challenge in healthcare is that the healthcare market has never facilitated that buying motion. As I think you know all too well, it is impossible today, for love of money, to see a price and click a buy button in healthcare the way you can in every other consumer category. And to make matters worse, everyone has an insurance plan in this country. It's either commercial insurance via the employer, Medicare, Medicaid. And what these insurance plans do is they step in and they shift the pricing dynamic. So all of a sudden, even if your doctor knew their own prices, you could say, hey, what's my cost today, doctor? And the doctor would say, well, I have no idea, because your insurance company is going to apply a copay or a coinsurance or a deductible, any of these variables that no one understands. And then the number you're going to pay, who knows? We're going to find out in 6 weeks together. And that simple breakage, in our view, breaks the entire market. All of a sudden, you have a consumer market where people can't shop and move the way they should. And so we said, okay, we need to do whatever it takes to fix that. And that idea, that philosophical position, started the entire process and journey that is Superscript.
Yeah. And I remember this conversation vividly, because part of what we do is talking to startups who are trying to utilize AI. And look, everyone has a great bold plan. Not everyone has the right materials combined that you can say this not only needs to work, it's going to work. So again, we probably don't have enough time in one podcast to cover it all, but I want to give you the platform to talk about from the early idea to now.
Mm-hmm.
And the support that you got from the broader community, because the backing and recognition and the caliber of people who heard what you were trying to do and said, yes, let's do it, was key early on. I know from the conversations we had with the community, before you had a website, before you had all the success that you had now, we were telling people this is the place to be. So
yeah,
let's summarize that journey from early on, early investors, to now.
Well, I appreciate that, JP. Before we had anything, there were just two kids with an idea, a big idea, and then a couple of people that believed in them. And then from that was born everything else. So really the way we got our start is me and my co-founder, Britt, we met in college, freshman year, really from sophomore year onwards, we were attached at the hip. We co-founded 2.5 years after college. 3-4 weeks into the journey, we had our idea, we made our initial pitch deck. And that original idea was, the pitch deck was about an app that would solve the problem that we were pointing towards. And to be frank, that app was a very small idea. And it was actually, given what we know now, very naive. But at the time, we thought it was a good idea. And we put that on a pitch deck and we shipped it out. And we were speaking to a couple of investors, and they were considering investing, not investing, etc. And then one of us said, hey, what would happen if we emailed Mark Cuban? That would be so funny. And so Rit wrote what we now know to be a fantastic cold email to Mark Cuban. And an hour and a half later, Mark replies and he says, what's the price? I mean, if the valuation is right. And the two of us basically fell out of our chairs. What? Mark replied. And so we then went back and forth with him and his legal team for about a day and a half. And then we did a deal. And so Mark wrote a check and we got started. We hired the first person to join our team, a guy named Joey, our founding engineer and CTO today. We got a tiny little cubicle in a WeWork. We bought some work laptops and we got cooking. And from there on out, it was what I call a conviction bootstrap. Basically, as we pull at the thread that is our idea, our philosophy, you run into a series of hurdles, blockers, reasons the idea will not work. And then every time you run into a hurdle or a blocker, you say, okay, are we going to run through this brick wall or around it? You do one of those two things, you figure out the solution. And then every time you do, your entire idea, your entire philosophy seems that much more believable. And because it's that much more believable, you can then pull in the conviction of people around you. So the way that looked 5 months after the Mark Cuban check is we, by that point, had a much more rigorous, quantitative idea for creating the first prices in healthcare. And so we made a white paper about it. And on the back of that white paper and a thesis document about how the market should operate, a couple of fantastic investors from Silicon Valley wrote a $3.5 million check into our business. And then that was really the license to hire a real team and then start building and start to deploy production software into the market. And then the conviction bootstrap continues. We deploy our first software. People go, oh, hey, this is kind of working. And then we get a bigger check. And then we increase the team size and we do more. So on and so forth. Today, super happy to say that we have a team of 30. We are working with over 15 live medical practices. We are contracted with north of 30 at this point, and the velocity is picking up. The solution is working in market. I mean, we're seeing patients see real prices for the first time, click buy buttons, have complete financial certainty like they should, and like they do in other markets. And we're seeing medical practices collect far more patient revenue dollars, because what happens under status quo, as I think you might know, is when people don't have prices, the bill arrives 6 weeks later. And then when that bill arrives 6 weeks later, it almost feels like extortion because it's a number that you did not agree to. And the fabric of a contract between a buyer and a seller is the agreed upon price point that exists before the buyer and the seller do their deal. And so when you don't have that fairness, you don't have that fair contract, people just don't pay the number. They say, this bill, I didn't agree to it, and they don't pay. And then medical practices end up not collecting 30, 40, 50% of the dollars that they should collect, which is very unfortunate for them because they actually need the revenue. The vast majority of medical practices are struggling from a cash flow standpoint.
So let me jump in there. So look, again, so grateful for you to share that story. It really demonstrates the idea was sound, people bought into it, and it's working. The evolution of the AI industry has brought around more broader acceptance where people are starting to believe that this is possible, it can be disrupted, it can be fixed. The important distinction there that you highlighted, the health systems and hospitals are benefiting from this as well, not just us, the consumer. And you highlighted that, and that was one of the questions that you answered for me many years ago was, these guys are almost incentivized to keep it complex. How do we fix that? And the fix is you tell the hospitals and health systems doing it this way will get them more money, you get them paid quicker, faster, and the consumer will be happier. Love all of that. Let's jump into the AI side of it, because what you're talking about is a well-known problem for a long time, and companies with much bigger budgets have tried and failed to solve this. So without giving away the secret sauce, how have you guys tackled this? How is AI helping you solve this problem? And you can break it into both sides, for the consumer and the health systems. What can you share with us?
Absolutely. The way we like to think about this internally, and this was a bit of a maturity on our part. At the very beginning of this journey, we believed the thing that I think a lot of people believe about the healthcare industry, which is that there are some, mustache twirling villains that just want to starch consumers, starch medical practices, and they're the reason the industry is broken. They're just bad actors and they're bad guys, and we just need to get rid of those bad guys. But the truth is much more complicated, as it tends to be. The way we reason about it today is we point to something that we call the healthcare industrial complex. And the healthcare industrial complex, you can think of as just a giant block of stuff that sits between the buyer and the seller in this market. Now, the vast majority of people in this market are actually good faith actors. People that become doctors, by and large, want to provide care to patients. They really want to make people's lives better. And patients, believe it or not, actually want to pay their physicians. They don't like skipping out on the payment to the doctor that they love, who takes care of them. But when you have this giant block of healthcare industrial complex stuff sitting between the two, that makes it impossible for the two sides of the market to talk to each other in the language of price, everything breaks. All of a sudden, the patient doesn't want to pay because they don't know the price, and the provider can't collect their dollars. And frankly, the provider can't even make care decisions that are grounded in your financial realities because they have no idea what anything is going to cost. Then on top of that, you see experience breakages across the stack. Why do patients feel like the front desk doesn't treat them with care and kindness? It's not because the front desk person is, a mean person that wants you to feel bad when you walk into the office. It's rather the case that typically a front desk person in a medical practice is kind of harangued and harassed, not by patients, but by the healthcare industrial complex. They're verifying insurance plans on the phone with the patient. Hello, is this patient in network? And what is their benefit? And they're doing this 5 times in a row because they have 10 patients sitting in front of them trying to go in to see the doctor. And so they're so busy serving their master, the healthcare industrial complex, that they don't even have the time to step back and say, wait. This is a consumer-facing category and actually fundamentally a hospitality industry. We need to be thinking about the patients. They don't have time. They can't allocate their focus accordingly. So how does this connect to AI? Well, to step back even to technology first and then AI, the goal of technology is to automate the manual, tedious work that doesn't require a human touch. And really what AI does is it expands the aperture for that function. It says a whole bunch of work that conventional, traditional technology could not have automated. Today, with basic intelligence, we can automate more, right? What AI and technology allows us to do is dive into that healthcare industrial complex stack and say, okay, we're going to take this off of your plate. We're going to take this entire block and move it literally into the Superscript office. That's why our tech backend is super complicated, so that your medical practice and your patient experience doesn't have to be. So now to get a little more kind of specific, I'll say two things. One thing is we're really lucky that we had a number of kind of serendipitous alignments over the course of the company journey. There were about 3 separate occasions where we ran into a problem that would have been impossible to solve 2 years before, 1 year before, 1 month before, but it just so happened that some technology was released. You know, OpenAI released a new LLM, and it's like, oh wow, we can actually use that to solve this problem. And then the next thing you know, we're automating something that had never been automated before. So part of what helped us was that we were just pulling this thread at the right time, and because we were running at it so quickly, whenever there was a new tech unlock, we were kind of the first to say, how can this help us? And we connected that dot very, very fast because we were trying to run into those brick walls. The second thing I'll say is a bit of a philosophical position on the role of AI in medical practices. And I kind of hinted at this with the healthcare industrial complex story. There are a lot of players in the technology industry today that think that AI should replace the humans in the industry. You know, like you should phone the medical practice, and instead of speaking to a person, you should speak to an AI robot scheduler. Or instead of texting with your doctor, you should text an AI that's going to say, have you taken your medications today? And maybe that's a future. Doesn't really sound like a future that I want to live in. I don't know about you. I don't like talking to robots. I like talking to humans. We believe quite strongly that the role of AI in healthcare in particular is to live deeply embedded in technology stacks that remove tedious administrative work from the plates of the actual humans that execute on the day-to-day healthcare tasks. Not so that the humans can be replaced, but so that they can be freed to serve patients. And that philosophy has led to us building along a very, very different pathway in the industry, which I think has served us very, very well.
Indeed, it has. Let's stay on that because I want to tie it back into the build of the team over the past 3 years or so. Started with you and your co-founder. We had conversations very, very early on. I think your founding engineer and CTO had just joined, and we were crafting a potential roadmap together. It's like, how do we go from A to B to C? And one of the things that really stood out early on for me was you had a very clear understanding of the culture and environment that you wanted to operate in and create. And that was going to be just as, if not more important than the skill set of anyone we brought to you. And that has stayed apparent throughout the journey. Walk us through the build. Again, conscious of time, but share a little bit about what the journey has been like, what you learned from going from a team of 2 to 30 and many more to come down the road. Talk about that build, what that was like, what you enjoyed about it, what you learned from it.
There's that beautiful phrase, I forget who said it first, but it's culture eats strategy for breakfast. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that we believed in a soft way at the beginning of the journey. And today we believe it very, very strongly. And the reason we believe that so strongly is because what we've seen time and time again is when a company has to run into a series of very, very big problems, yes, you can get into the nuts and bolts of solving those specific problems. And someone has to within the organization, right? But really the job when crafting a company, and this is true for everyone in the company, we are all crafting a company together more so than we are crafting, bits and pieces of technology, is to build an organism that can consistently and persistently surmount challenges that the other organisms could not. Yeah. And what is the fabric of that organism? It's culture. So now to dive into that, a little bit more deeply, I think something that we wove into our culture at the very start, which served us, was the idea that we don't believe in no-win situations. If someone says, hey, this is impossible, we say, no, it must be. Let's figure out how. Someone says, don't even try this. They're like, we're going to try it anyways, and then report back in 2 months if it didn't work. Let's just give us a try. And that means we do run into brick walls sometimes. And at the same time, almost every brick wall we've run into over the course of the company journey, the 3rd or 4th time we run into it, we break through it. And then, there's a big reward on the other side. that culture we wove in at the very, very start. And it has been such a joy to see that grow and then to figure out what it means to serve that culture. A soundbite that resonates for me right now is something we've been thinking about a lot recently, which is when you think about the version of our company that is the most successful version, the version that changes the entire US healthcare industry and then serves phenomenal consumer technology for the next 30, 40, 50 years. It's a version of the company that is comprised of the most radiant versions of every single person in this room. Because that is the version of every single person in this room that will be able to look at a brick wall and say, I can run through that. Society doesn't really train people to think that way. Typically, it says, hey, that's a problem and no one has been able to solve it yet, so you can't either. And part of what we have to do in our little reality distortion field is say, how can you step into the Superscript bubble and then believe that anything and everything is possible? And so that's a critical part of our cultural fabric today.
It's at the core of your mission, right? You're trying to solve a problem that has not been solved before, but just because it hasn't been solved before doesn't mean it can't be solved, especially with the emergence of these newer technologies and operating on the bleeding edge. You're using the new tools that are available to you. You're building the plane as you're flying it, which I love.
I would love to actually concretize that a little bit because you asked about the build, so let's connect it. One of the most controversial decisions we made at the very start is everyone was like, healthcare pricing is impossible. People have tried to crack that nut many, many times. To your point, companies with more resources, technology, et cetera, have tried. And something that we identified at the start was, well, if you take a look at how healthcare makes, and this is revealing a bit of the secret sauce, but that's fine. If you take a look at how healthcare makes prices today, it is a price after the fact mechanism. What do I mean by that? Well, literally the process of making a healthcare price is an event happens in a practice, healthcare happens, physician performs treatment. Then the practice makes a medical claim. Now already we are after the fact because the claim exists after. Then that medical claim gets adjudicated by an insurance company. And then after that adjudication, the medical claim is returned to the practice and that returned claim contains consumer's price. So now we're sitting 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks later. That is the process by which healthcare makes prices. And that is why healthcare prices exist after the fact, because they literally cook them after the fact. And so the process that the path that the rest of the industry was following was, okay, well, how do we take that thing that exists and make it faster and make it more efficient? And so really what was happening was they were kind of reducing the time between treatment and claim adjudication. And they were getting better and better at estimating what that claim might look like after the fact. And the thing that we saw was, well, if you just continue on that pathway, you end up in a world with better and better estimates. But an estimate doesn't pass the test. It doesn't pass the consumer litmus test because an estimate is not actionable. You can't click a buy button on an estimate, and consumers need to be able to click buy buttons. And so we said, and this was kind of a cheeky idea at the start, we said, well, all healthcare prices are made up. All prices are made up full stop, actually. You go to Amazon and a pack of 12 energy drinks cost $26. Why does it cost $26? No one knows, but we do all know that that's roughly the cost of a 12 pack of energy drinks. All prices are made up. So what if we just make up the healthcare prices? And then if we take on the risk of making up those healthcare prices, well, then the prices will be real because the consumer pays the price that we make up and then we take on the risk. And so if there's any gap between the price we made up and the real price, we just eat that. And then we realize, okay, that works, but now we have to be really good at making up the prices because otherwise we're going to take on a ton of risk and go bankrupt. And that was a path. That was a path that no one else in the industry had considered yet because everyone was kind of sticking to the mold of how the industry does things. And we said, skip this process that happens after the fact. Let's try something new beforehand. And it was following that led to our novel solution and why we can say today we make the first and only stable upfront healthcare prices in all cases. And you can see how that folds into this belief that anything is possible. Because if we had, if we had asked seasoned healthcare veteran XYZ 5 years ago, does this sound feasible? They would have said no. This is how the industry works. And
it's only when you describe the problem that you're actually solving, you realize that all of those other companies with all those other attempts were trying to solve the wrong problem. With the time we have remaining, the road ahead, again, looking over your shoulder and all the learns and all the roadblocks and all the walls that you bust through, most importantly, all the success and what you've learned. when you look at the road ahead, particularly the next 1 to 2 years, because it's hard to know beyond that with the advancement of the technology that we're using within AI. What are you excited about? What are you hoping to accomplish? We catch up a year or two from now. What does the business look like?
Cool. A lot of startups run into the faster horse problem. And it's really hard to navigate the faster horse problem, which is if you just ask the market, what do you want? They say, we want a faster horse, right? And then you never invent a car. And so the question is, okay, well, how do you then cook up a car? Because you're also supposed to be asking the market what they want.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the correct process, but I can tell you this is the process we followed and it worked for us. We said, here's the philosophy, here's what we want for the market. Now let's make the technology that makes that future possible. And that took us 2.5 years. We spent 2.5 years in R&D before we tried to commercialize anything for anyone because we needed to make sure that we were making the right thing. After we made that thing, then we had to say, okay, now how does that thing actually talk to the market? And I sometimes think of the layer that we had to build around our technology as almost an adapter layer. And the journey of getting that adapter layer right is a long one in its own right, because that is then the point at which you have to take this technology you've cooked and say, okay, now what are the day-to-day medical practice flows? What are the day-to-day patient flows? And how can we make the use of this technology seamless? And that journey was a year and a half too. Now, the thing that excites me so much today is the latest version of our core product, practice facing. It's called Skylight. And this is now on the back of 2 years, just in the trenches, observing customers, shipping multiple iterations of practice facing product, figuring out what is the right way to intervene, almost at a pinpoint. How can we provide the maximum value? The thing that we do best, that price, that certainty, without overloading their workflows. In fact, making their workflows simpler without requiring crazy change management. Once upon a time, we were doing that. We were deploying a product that required 5 weeks of training. The new version of the product, a couple of minutes, maybe 30 minutes at most. So the thing I'm really excited about now is it feels like that practice-facing wheel is about to spin really, really fast. And why is that important for us? Because at the core, Superscript is really a network business. We don't talk about it that way very much because if we did with investors, they'd throw us out of the room. So you'll hear about how we're a network business in many years. Not yet today, but I'll tell you a little bit now. Why are we a network business? Because really the pricing technology we make is communication technology. It's translation technology. Like it doesn't matter if we have this pricing secret sauce if no one is using it. So for us to fix the US healthcare market, what we need to do now is actually distribute that pricing technology to the market broadly. And once we have succeeded at that mission, we will enter this bright future where all patients have real prices. They can click buy buttons and practices get their money instantly every time. And they don't have to worry about chasing patients down, bills and collections and medical debt, etc. The practice-facing product wheel spinning really, really fast means that we've now reached the point where that distribution is going to happen really, really quickly. And so I think in 2 years' time, we'll be able to sit and have a conversation about the 500 medical groups, 600 medical groups that are using Superscript. And we will be able to have early conversations about the consumer-facing marketplace, because that's something we have been cooking for forever. We believe healthcare needs its Amazon. You need to be able to go to a homepage for healthcare, see all the options, see the pricing, click the buy button. And of course, the challenge of building the Amazon, besides the pricing, is building the network of enough physicians that the marketplace is an Amazon and isn't just a, little 30 doctor webpage. And figuring out that distribution unlocks the marketplace. So
the way I view what you've built as Superscript is the more people that find out about it, whether it be health systems or consumers, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't want this unless it directly disrupts their own pockets, the twirly mustache people. But health systems want this, consumers want this. Final question from me. I've asked you this a good few years ago. I want to ask you again for the benefit of their audience. When you're speaking to talented people who you want to join Superscript and help you on this journey, what is it that you tell them that gets them convinced enough to join you guys over some of the other great startups also working on innovative things? You probably answered it in this podcast, but just I want to condense it, a final message to potential future employees of yours.
Cool. To your point, articulated a lot. I find that typically when people are evaluating us, they want to know the mission. Are they doing something worth doing? They want to know about us. Are we serious? And you can decide that for yourself, podcast or meet us. I think the way I want to tackle this now is just actually with a question that we throw at candidates all the time, which is, I said earlier that the version of this company that is most successful, that accomplishes its wildest dreams, is the version of this company where every single person in the company is the most radiant version of themselves. And when I say radiant, I mean that, you're glowing, you're bright. Critically, you are the best, most performant version of yourself. So that means Superscript is a place where, we work really hard. It's intense, and it has to be, right? It has to be. We're trying to change a lot, and you don't change an entire industry and potentially entire country without putting out a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And it's also a space where you need to be open to going into yourself and then exploring who you are and who you want to be. I sometimes like to say that this entire company journey is a process of becoming. Superscript is becoming. And just as Superscript is becoming, so is every single person in the company. So if you want to put out the best 10 years of your life from a performance standpoint, commit fully to the process of becoming, work really hard, have a ton of fun, and do something worth doing in the process, then talk to us.
This is the place to be.
Yeah.
Rahul, thank you, my friend. I can't believe we waited this long to do this, but I know you've been busy, and we've been busy with you, helping you along the way, and it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm delighted that we finally got you on to share the story. We could have done it from day one when you first came out with stealth mode, because I knew then that, all right, this is something serious. This is a rocket ship. People need to get on board. But having waited and now talking about where you are, it's further backed up my view that you guys were going to absolutely crush it. So I'm delighted that you came on and shared the journey. We very much appreciate the work you've done and wish you, the team, and everyone at Superscript the very best of luck in the road ahead.
JP, thank you so much. Your support has meant the world.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.